Hello everyone, welcome to Visionary First Step YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss about the topic the living world, which is the first topic from first PUC biology. Now in this topic we are going to discuss about the Ernst Mayr, scientist who was known as Darwin of the 20th century, and in the later part we are going to discuss about the what is living topic, and then I am going to teach you the next part, that is categories, diversity in the living organisms and all those things. So without any further delay, let's get started. Just look at the personality, and he was Ernst Mayr, scientist Ernst Mayr. His time from 1904 to 2004, around 100 years. He lived for 100 years, and contribution for biology was enormous, and he was known as Darwin of the 20th century. And he joined Harvard University faculty of arts and science in 1953 and retired in 1975, assuming the title Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology Emeritus. Okay, then throughout his 80 years of career, his research was around ornithology, which is something related to study of birds, taxonomy, as we know, it is the scientific way of classification of organisms, zoo geography, distribution of animals, then evolution, something related to the how organisms evolved from the simplest form to the complex form, systematics. So systematic deals with again evolutionary relationship between the organisms, and the history of organisms from simplest to the complex, again philosophy of biology. So these are the concept he has taken from research. Okay, he almost single-handedly made the origin of species diversity the central question of evolutionary biology that is today. And he also given definition for species. So what is the definition of species? Group of similar organisms, when they undergo interbreed, they are able to produce the fertile offspring. So that standard definition was given by Ernst Mayr, and he also pioneered with the same thing, current definition of species. And Mayr was awarded with the 3 prize, Triple Crown of Biology. It was known as Triple Crown of Biology, that is Balzan Prize in 1983, International Prize for Biology in 1994, and the Crawford Prize in 1999. Mayr died at the age of 100 in 2004. So this is brief about the scientist Ernst Mayr. Now coming to the topic, because as we all know, all the parts in NCERT are very important for NEET examination. So even we are not supposed to neglect the diagrams also. So these diagrams are not given in NCERT. Just to make you understand the terminologies given here, I have given all the pictures. Okay, we will go in detail about this. First of all, we will let you know what and all we are going to discuss in this topic. So in this topic, we are going to discuss about what is living, diversity in the living world, taxonomic categories. So the first topic deals with certain characters the living organism shows. And some characters are even present in non-living organism also. And with these characters, we'll come to the conclusion that which character is going to be the feature of the living organism and which character is going to be a property of the living organism. That I will discuss in detail. Then the second topic is related to diversity in the living world. So this is all about all the type of living organism present in this world, including from unicellular organism to the most complex organism. Around 1.7 to 1.8 million different species are so far identified, and yet too there are so many organisms to be found out, and scientists are working on it. Okay, the next one, taxonomic category. Here taxonomic category is related to classification. Okay, we study the organisms by grouping them at different levels. Like we can study the organism at species level, genus level, likewise family, order, class, then phylum or division, and kingdom. Like that, categories, nothing but the grouping at different hierarchy or ranks, we will study in detail under the taxonomic categories. Now let us look at this statements. The extraordinary habitats in which we find living organisms, be it cold mountains, here you can see deciduous forest. Deciduous forest means where the trees, they shed their leaves at the time of winter. Then oceans, here you can see I included the picture of ocean, freshwater lake here, then desert, hot springs, then beauty of galloping horses, migratory birds, valley of flowers, attacking sharks evokes awe and deep sense of wonder. What is the purpose of giving this statement in the early part of the topic? It is just to make you curious about your surroundings. Most of the time in our busy life, we forget to observe our surroundings. But when you just take a few minutes to observe your surroundings, you see a lot of different species of plants, animals, insects. There are so many things. So the first part is to make you to have a idea of how the diversity is existed in this world, and they are trying to give you an idea of beauty of this nature. That's why I included all these pictures just to have a glance at different habitats which are present around us. Okay, now just look at this, the first part. What is living? When we are trying to define living, we conventionally look for distinctive characteristics exhibited by the living organisms. So living organisms, they have some distinct characters. What are those distinct characters? Like living organisms, they show growth, they show reproduction, they show metabolism, they show consciousness, self-consciousness, emergence. So these are some of the characteristics of living organisms. Okay, so growth, reproduction, and ability to sense the environment and mount a suitable response come to our mind immediately as unique feature of living organism. These are very common in almost all the living organisms. One can add few more characters like metabolism, ability to self-replicate, self-organize, interact, and emergence. Now we will try to understand these terminologies. Metabolism, sum total of all the chemical reaction taking place in the body of the living organisms, which includes anabolism and catabolism. Ability to self-replicate, what is the meaning of this? See, it is related to cell as well as it is related to unicellular organisms. Okay, so when we take a cell, when the cell is decided to undergo cell division, its nucleus containing DNA have ability to undergo self-replication, right? It has its own mechanism to undergo self-replication. Then self-organize. What is the meaning of self-organize? See, once the zygote starts to divide and produce more and more cells, these cells, they organize themselves and start to form different organs. Then interact in the sense response to something, or just imagine a bacteria in a culture plate, and if you add antibiotics, this bacteria shows inhibition in the region where the antibiotic present. So that's how they interact with their environment. Similarly, if there is a hot environment, organism move from hot environment to cold environment or moderate environment. That's how they interact with the environment. And emergence, this is very beautiful character. In detail we study later. Emergence means because of the interaction of things, it leads to one particular character. Say for example, the interaction of the cells present in the tissue gives the property to one particular tissue, that is called emergence. Say for example, muscle cells present in the skeletal muscle, they all interact together and give rise to one emergence effect, that is nothing but the ability to show movement in the skeletal muscle. That is the emergence character. Anyhow, we will discuss in detail. So why they have given here in the first slide about the characteristics of living organism? Because these characters help us to say this particular thing is a living organism and this is non-living organism. So in the point of competitive exam like NEET exam, we need to understand each and everything with the details, because they just take statements from these particular paragraphs and they create statement based question. So at that point of time we will get confused. So in the last examination, I have observed in one of our practice test paper, they just twisted like this. They have given one question like this: which of the following is the defining character of living organism? See, defining character means it includes everything. Defining feature means only few things. Defining property means only one thing, that I will explain you later. Just to have this particular concept in your mind, because while I am teaching each and every sentence, do focus on this, because this is it looks like very simple, but only when we understand each and every line we are able to crack the questions. Okay, now coming to growth, it's very simple. Growth is irreversible permanent change which occurs in the body of the living organisms. Irreversible permanent change. Once growth takes place, it cannot be reversed. That is one thing. Second thing, increase in mass and increase in number of individuals are twin characteristics of growth. What is this statement actually trying to say? See, if one organism is growing, means the number of cells goes on increasing. Once the number of cell increases, mass of the organism also increases. That means you cannot separate these two characters. Okay, so number of cell increased means number of mass increased. Number of mass increased means indirectly the number of cells also increased. That's why these two characters are considered as twin characters. A multicellular organism grow by cell division. Okay, even unicellular organism also grow by cell division, but why specifically they have given multicellular organism grow by cell division? There is one peculiar character we observe in unicellular organism, where cell division and reproduction, or growth and reproduction, cannot be separately defined. Let us take one example to understand this. There is one bacteria. Now this bacteria is inoculated to a nutrient medium. Bacteria, by utilizing the nutrient medium, started to grow and form a colony. That colony is representing what? It is representing numerous bacteria. Now what we say, the inoculated bacteria to nutrient media has shown an enormous growth. Now that growth is because of what? Reproduction in the bacteria. Now here we cannot differentiate the two words, reproduction and growth. They are synonymous. Okay, that's why they have taken multicellular organisms grow by cell division. For that they have given some examples, like in plants, growth is continuous. What is the meaning of this? Growth is continuous. Up to, in animals, the growth takes place up to some extent, and after that they attain reproductive maturity, then growth retards and reproduction is observed, and after that worn out cells are replaced. That's it. But in plants it is not like that. In a plant body, in different parts of the plant body, they have meristematic cells. As we know, there is an apical meristem, intercalary meristem, lateral meristem. Meristematic cells are dividing cells. So because of those cells, in throughout their life they shows the growth. Okay, so in animals it is up to certain age. However, cell division occurs in certain tissue to replace the lost cells. In case of animals, even though growth is retarded, the worn out cells are replaced by cell division. But in the case of unicellular organism, growth and reproduction are synonymous. This is very important. Okay. Now, in majority of the higher animals and plants, growth and reproduction are mutually exclusive events. Again, this statement is very, very important. Why? Why they have given in majority of higher animals and plants? Why higher animals and plants? See, once the vegetative growth is complete, then this majority of the higher plants and animals, they attain reproductive maturity and then they reproduce. Here reproduction and growth is not taking place simultaneously. Instead, first growth takes place, then reproduction is observed in the majority of the higher plants and animals. But it is not same in all the cases. In some organisms, what happens? Even at the time of reproduction, they show the growth. Okay, that's why they have used the term majority. Majority of the higher animals and plants, where you can clearly differentiate the vegetative growth of the organism and the reproductive part of the, or reproductive phase of the organism. So one must remember that increase in body mass is considered as growth. Obviously, how can we measure the growth? Increase in body mass. So when we take this criteria for measuring the growth, increase in body mass, imagine there is one mountain. Okay, so this mountain is consisting of so many living organisms and plants. These plants, they litter. Once the fallen leaves start to undergo decay, they add more and more soil. So what happens at that time? The mass of that mountain externally it increases. Similarly, if there is one sand dunes, because of wind, sand from one side to another side it moves. At that time, the mass of that sand dune also increases. Similarly, the rocks or boulders. So when these non-living things also show their growth externally, there is a problem by taking growth as a defining feature or property of living organism. So with this, we can just take growth is also one of the character of living organism. Please do understand, growth is one of the character of living organism. Growth is the only character which is used to define the living organism. I hope you understood this statement. This is very, very important. Okay. Now, living organisms growth is from inside. This is very important. So even though non-living things, they show growth, It is not from inside, it is from outside. But in living organism, growth is from inside. Growth therefore cannot be taken as a defining property of living organism. This statement is very important. Reason is these are the exceptions. Okay, so condition under which it can be observed in all living organisms have to be explained, and then we understand that it is the characteristics of living systems. Okay, so why here this statement is given? He is trying to say that if any character is present in all the living organisms without exception, then only we can say that that character is a defining property of the living organism. But here it is not the case. There are some non-living things also show their increase in mass. So that's why growth is one of the defining character of living organisms. Of course, dead organisms does not show growth. Now moving on to the next concept, reproduction. What is reproduction? Production of offsprings which are similar to their parents. Now the moment when I use the term similar to their parents, not exactly same to their parents, it is representing the sexual mode of reproduction, because in sexual mode of reproduction there will be a slight variation. So the offspring is similar to their parent, not exactly similar to their parents. Then so sexual mode of reproduction is present in some of the organism, and some of the lower organisms they show asexual mode of reproduction. There are some advantages as well as some disadvantages. We were not going to discuss about those aspects, but we are taking some of the examples for asexual mode of reproduction because these are very important. Now when we take the example of fungi they reproduce by production of asexual spores. Now the fungal hyphae which is forming from the asexual spores, those hyphae are exactly similar to their parents. Okay, at the same time when this hyphae undergo fragmentation, each fragment have ability to give rise to a new fungus. Okay, this is also a mode of asexual reproduction. Now there are some curious examples, like in case of planaria, a true regeneration is observed. That means if you cut the planaria into 2 half or 3 half, the each fragments they grow into an entire organism. That is called true regeneration. Because regeneration even observed in wall lizard also, where if you cut the tail of the wall lizard, after some days again it will grow, but the worn out part or torn part of the lizard will not grow into a new individual. That is not a true regeneration, it is a regeneration. Okay, then in some organisms we observe budding. Example is yeast. Yeast they show budding. A small outgrowth is formed and that outgrowth will be detached and that will grow into a new individual. Same thing is observed in hydra also. Then in some of the algae and protonema of the moss, right now you don't know what is protonema of the moss. This is the structure formed from the spores which are filamentous and branched. When they grow, they form secondary protonema and leaf-like structure in the case of bryophytes, especially the classification mosses. Okay, so why they have taken this example, fungi, algae and protonema of the moss? Here the thallus or undifferentiated body of the organism, when it undergo fragmentation, each fragment will give rise to a new individual. So these are some of the example for asexual mode of reproduction. You can observe in this slide, this one, protonema of the moss, this is yeast, planaria and hydra. All these are the example for asexual mode of reproduction. Now when it comes to unicellular organisms, this is very important. I already explained, but the statement is given even in reproduction also. When it comes to unicellular organism, it is very difficult to define the reproduction and growth separately, because Those two are synonymous words in the case of unicellular organism. When we say the number of unicellular organism increased, so it is directly saying that they are undergoing reproduction. So reproduction is also same, growth is also same. So they are synonymous in the case of unicellular organisms. So we have already defined the growth as equivalent to increase in cell number or mass. Hence we notice that single celled organisms, we are not very clear about the usage of these two terms, growth and reproduction. Okay, so this is about what I explained just now. It is very difficult to differentiate the growth and reproduction. Now the question comes, why cannot we can take reproduction as one single character to define the living organisms? Because only living organisms can show a reproduction. No non-living things can show reproduction, right? But there is some exceptions. When we look at infertile couples of humans and the worker bees and the mule, this is the animal produced from hybridization between the horse and donkey. These two are different species. They are not able to produce the next generation. They are all infertile. So what it indicates here, even though they are living organisms, but they are unable to produce the offsprings. That means we cannot take this reproduction as the defining property of living organisms, because it is not found in all the organisms. There are some exceptions. That's why reproduction is one of the character of living organisms. Okay. Now moving on to the slide, here you can see this is mule and this is worker bee. I hope first two concepts are very clear, because these two are just the character of living organisms, not the feature, not the property of living organism. They are the characters, just a character of the one of the character of living organisms. Now coming to metabolism. This is interesting. What is metabolism? Can we see metabolism outside the body or outside the cell? So we have so many questions. First we will define what is metabolism. Sum total of all the chemical reaction taking place in the body of the living organism is called metabolism. Sum total of all the chemical reactions. It may be a building up process or it may be a breaking down process. I take very simple example to explain you the metabolism. We take food, we consume food, which is usually in the complex form. Complex carbohydrates, proteins, fats. What happens to these proteins, fats and carbohydrate when it enters our digestive system? Our digestive system produces enzymes, digestive enzymes. They act on these complex carbohydrates, proteins and fats, and they break down it and produces the simpler form of it. Say for example, when carbohydrate undergo breakdown by the amylase enzyme, it produces simple sugars. When protein is acted upon by the protease enzyme, it produces simple amino acids. When fats are acted upon by the lipase enzyme, it produces fatty acids and glycerols. So this process of breaking down the complex one to form a simpler product, this we call it as catabolism. What is the definition of catabolism then? So catabolism is the breaking down process. And metabolism also includes building up process, and it is known as anabolism. So what happens here? Same example we will continue. Once the simpler products are formed in our digestive system, it is absorbed by the small intestine and they will reach the bloodstream. Now nutrients which are present in the bloodstream reaches the cell, and now the cell uses this simpler form of sugar and amino acid and fatty acids and glycerol to construct the complex structures in the cell, and this process we call it as anabolism. So imagine cell is preparing to produce a protein. It requires amino acids. Where does this amino acid comes from? It comes from the food what we consume. Okay, so same protein undergo breakdown. Simple amino acids in the blood are taken up by the cell and they use it for the construction of complex proteins in the cell. That we call it as anabolism. Now, when we look at any of the non-living things, we are not able to see metabolism. But there is one interesting thing. If we take a metabolite from the living system and we can perform this metabolism in vitro condition. In vitro means outside the body. Now let me take one example. Take a sample of starch, which is a complex carbohydrate, add a drop of iodine to it. Because of this complex structure of starch, iodine, they get trapped in that complex structure and turns the solution color to blue color. Okay. Now, for this, you take a sample of your salivary amylase from the mouth and add it. Once you add salivary amylase, slowly the carbohydrate, complex carbohydrate starch undergo breakdown and produces simple sugars. So during this process, the iodine molecules which got trapped in the complex structure of the carbohydrate get separated and the solution again becomes clear. Now with this experiment, what we can conclude, metabolism even takes place outside the body in the in vitro condition. But metabolism, surely it is derived from the living organisms. Okay. So it takes place in all the organisms. That's why we can consider metabolism as the defining feature of the living organisms, not the property. Okay, because there is one exception. The metabolism can be performed in vitro condition. That's why it is considered defining feature of the living organism. Okay. No non-living object exhibit metabolism, and metabolic reactions can be demonstrated outside the body in the cell-free system. I have given one example also. Now, an isolated metabolic reaction outside the body of an organism performed in the test tube is neither living nor non-living because it is derived from the living organisms. Hence, the statements are very, very important, used in formation of assertion and reasons. Hence, while metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without exception, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things but surely living reactions. Okay, so when we look at these two sentences, and this is the favorite sentence for framing assertion and reason. Hence, cellular organization of the body is defining feature of living forms. Cellular organization as well as metabolism. Why directly, without giving explanation, they have given cellular organization is the defining feature of the living organism? Because inside the cell, metabolism takes place. If metabolism is the defining feature of the living organism, then cellular organization is also a defining feature of living organisms. Now one more very important character, very important character which defines the living organism or which is one of the property of living organism, that is consciousness. In other words, we can also say response to stimulus. Now this is present in all the organisms without any exception. It may be a unicellular organism, multicellular organism, prokaryote, eukaryote, whatever it is. We observe consciousness without any exceptions. What is that? Let us take some example. If there is one plant which is kept inside the box, wooden box, and there is one small hole and through which light is penetrating. Now what happens to the plant? After some time it starts to bend towards the light. Means this plant is showing response to light, right? There are so many examples. When we touch a hot body, we suddenly take our hands, right? What it indicates? Response to a stimulus. Similarly, if you grow a bacterium in the medium, add a drop of antibiotic, in that area there will not be a growth of bacteria. So what it indicates, they are responding to external stimuli. So this external stimuli may be in the form of biological, physical or chemical. Okay. Now there are some examples given here which is defining the consciousness in all the organisms. Same thing I explained. Now by observing all these characters in all the organisms about consciousness, we can say that consciousness is the defining property of all the living organisms without any exception. Okay, so with respect to human beings, we have one special character, and that is called self-consciousness, self-awareness. Okay, but what if a person is brain dead? When he was in coma, is he able to show us self-consciousness? The answer is no. But his body is showing all the response. His heart is showing beating, and his body is showing breathing, and his kidney is filtering the blood. What it indicates? Even though he does not have self-consciousness, but he has a consciousness. That's why consciousness is the defining property of all the living organisms. Okay. Now here there are some interesting points. Till here we have taken some of the characters like growth, reproduction, metabolism, consciousness, self-consciousness. Along with this, we have one more character, that is called emergence. Now these statements given here, they are actually defining the emergence character. Properties of tissues are not present in the constituent cell, but arise as a result of interaction among the constituent cells. So when we read out this statement, it's very difficult to understand. Better we do one thing, we take one example and then we define this statement. Let us see what is it is trying to explain. Properties of the tissue. Here we will take one tissue. Okay, let us consider skeletal muscle. Okay, skeletal muscle, what is its property? It helps in movement. Helps in movement. Now this property, is it because of one cell present in the skeletal muscle? Answer is no. How this character is arising? It is arising because of interaction among the cells which is present in that tissue. Okay, so that is where emergence character appears. There is one more statement. Property of cell organelle is not present in the chemical constituent of the cell organelle, but arise as a result of the interaction among the chemical constituent of the cell organelle. So for this also we take one example. Say for example mitochondria. This is one of the cell organelle. What is the property of the mitochondria? Which helps in production of ATP. Means it is a powerhouse of the cell. So where did this property comes from? It is because of one enzyme which is present in the mitochondria? No, it is arising because of there are hundreds of different chemical constituents in that particular cell organelle. They are all interacting together and they performing glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport system, and finally producing the ATP. Okay, so that is the meaning of these two statements, and that is explaining emergence character. Now these interaction result in emergent properties at higher level of the organization, and this phenomena is true in the hierarchy of organizational complexity at all levels. So what is he is trying to explain you? That emergence property is not only present in higher level, it is present in lower level also. Just now we have taken the example of cell organelle. Likewise in cells, in tissues, because when the tissues they interact together, they form an organ, and it is present even in organ also. Interaction between the organs, they lead to organism. So that's why emergence character is present in all the complexity of levels. Then therefore we can say that living organisms are self-replicating, that means that DNA undergoes self-replication, evolving because of mutation or continuous exposure to the environmental changes, they show evolution, self-regulating, worn out cells are self-regulated, and interactive systems, there is an interaction between the molecules, cells, tissues, organs, okay, and capable of responding to external stimuli. So that is the definition of living organisms. The next topic is diversity in the living world.